request. And run per month. But to test this and to collect that, as I said earlier, was in any number of days had 1, 2, or I think as many as 4 different sets of eyes on some caffeine buses. Spends a lot of time with the principals and watching videotapes, and in case anyone doesn't know, all of our buses have at least 1 camera, some of them have 3, and not just for visual purposes, but for audio purposes as well. So if anyone does a incident on a bus to report, or a child comes home, please make sure their principal knows, and they will make sure to watch that video from file.
How will the transportation decide when a monitor might be needed? So that they're eventually available. So what's, I would make that call.
Yeah, Liz initially decided because of some reports we heard from families and children, and even feedback from some drivers. And some of our Littlest elementary runs were lingering because children weren't sure when to get off and needed a reminder. So she consulted with the bus drivers who said, "Will this help you?" And that was one determining. Another, I believe, is from a couple middle school runs where kids were not behaving appropriately. So she consulted with the drivers and information from the principal, but given that she said about it.
Okay, thank you. And so the feedback we've got so far is that there's that so far has been not ongoing right now. It's really
That feedback, now that, it's hit and miss, it all determines sort of on the bus that day or who remembers to get off. But, mostly at the middle school level, it's around correcting some behavior and expectations. And at the elementary level, it's around reminding kids to get off the bus. But she'll continue to check in. And if we do move forward with hiring some additional folks, she'll probably use that feedback to determine who she can employ.
thank you. Had any of the administrators been on the buses to go over behavior?
They've been on the buses. They've brought a group of kids off the bus that couldn't behave, and parents picked them up. They've met with students in small groups from feedback of morning runs. So that typically happens. It's not uncommon at the beginning of the year, but they have done on the bus.
I have a question about, we dealt with there was a lot parent complaints about crowding, overcrowding on buses, kids sitting on floors, standing up. Have we addressed those concerns?
To the best of my knowledge, we have. We're not receiving those reports anymore. I know she moved around some elementary buses and moved kids and changed the routes. And in fact, some of our elementary things here may have received an email, and we may have got one about a change in bus time or a drop off.
We stayed, nothing changed for us, but everyone got an email to check.
So yeah, those are being addressed. I believe the capacity of our buses legally is 72, and we don't have more than 60 kids on the middle school bus.
Can I just jump in here? There's 62 kids on my kid's bus. I know that for a fact. I'm sorry to get it, but That's what I'm listening for. So I just seems very focused on the younger kids, but
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions. Did we, so there was some people whose ride times on paper were reduced fairly substantially, from what I understand, which is a good thing. Did we add, so I don't know, do we call the short buses vans?
Liz calls them vans.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
and we've used vans to get into tricky spots
Yeah.
where buses get into turn around in the cul-de-sac or very narrow runs or very narrow roads. So it's not uncommon to see vans at any of the schools. Well, for children to ride a van more than that.
how many, if any, buses did we add through the reshuffling, and how many vans did we add through the reshuffling that we?
I don't believe any vans were added. I'll check on buses.
From day one, no vans? We got
Two buses?
two buses and no vans additional?
I don't know about the, but I know about two.
Because I only asked because I have a friend who lives on a street that was a bus to start, they went to a van. So I don't know if that van was vacant and had vacancy and they just added to it,
Yeah,
or
we
we put more.
We can check. I know she moves. She'll move children around. Sometimes it's where the van can maneuver in parts of our district, but also even time. Some of the longer runs, for example, I think I believe there's a van that goes from BB to our furthest northeast corner of our district and just quicker. And the route's quicker to go to Eastfield.
And then how does a bus, like, what is the cost of adding up two buses? That, we own the buses, so I'm guessing they're sitting there, so it's just the labor. So if it's our employees, is it overtime?
Yeah, no, the labor
Or are we
is-
taking them out of a building and not?
Yeah, the labor is already there. These are afternoon custodians that would start their shift on an afternoon bus and then go to school. As opposed to some of it, and Enrique will know better, but on morning, some of our morning drivers begin as a driver and then report to the school. Some of our custodians don't drive and they report to the school right in the morning, so we sort of have these staggered shifts to make sure that schools are always covered.
Does that mean they are in the school fewer hours because they're now driving a bus?
Of course, so there's a cost. There's a cost because those drivers were not sitting doing north. So instead of being in the building, they are driving. So sooner or later, we will have to pay overtime to clean those buildings. So there's a cost. So far, there hasn't been a cost, but I foresee a cost obviously, because if not, that means that for 2 hours, the people were doing nothing in the building.
Yeah, which is unlikely.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
But so far, we haven't.
So then whose budget will that hit? Does that hit a transportation budget or does that hit Anthony's budget? From well, I don't know, maybe they're connected. I don't know how it works, but is that gonna hit?
Usually we try to keep the transportation budget because that's stated. That keeps us stable.
Okay.
So anything like that, as of today, for example, and it's always been all the custodian drivers after salary and benefits go to the custodian side and half to the transportation side. For example, Anthony's salary, a portion also goes to transportation, so we can get stated because he counts lease, obviously lease is 100%.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
And I have this question. Do we have ridership numbers that look so far that we're gonna meet our state aid that we were hoping for? Are we seeing the ridership where we need it to be on the buses?
We got an email from our consultant, and according to him, so far it's a yes. But that's until we don't know it at the end of the year. There is all the unallowable, but the unallowable was, I'm not going to the email, or I'll look at it here. It was 14%, and we're down to like 8-9%. Unallowable. So the lower the percentage, the more state aid.
And how does that measure? So the consultant says we're trending in a direction that will allow for more state aid, but what does the consultant do to obtain that information? They put people with a clicker watching the kids get on.
No, it's basically, everything is in the software program. So the software program will say the Paso family, like the 2 kids. Last year, they were less than a mile from BB. No consultation aid for those 2 kids. Now they are more than a mile. Now I'll give you consultation aid.
All right, so that raises a separate question for me, and I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
confused. So I thought a couple of weeks ago when we were talking, we said that the ridership aid was going to be based on actual usage. So if more parents are driving, then that would detract.
No.
So how are we measuring that? And I think that's what you were asking, is the number of kids physically sitting on the bus at the threshold that we were expecting. What?
Right, that's what I was asking.
So how are we measuring the number of kids sitting in the seat to make sure that we're going to trigger that additional threshold that we were hoping to obtain so that we could offset the additional cost of zigzagging buses?
The second part I need to ask.
Okay.
I need to ask Lee, because I don't know how she knows how many kids are going.
Right.
Okay.
Fair.
I'll have to ask you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? I know this is out of order.
We can't,
No,
unfortunately.
okay, then I'll wait.
Yeah, perfect.
Great.
And put your name on the list.
Oh, it's there.
Okay.
I just wasn't sure of
Awesome.
the agenda.
And you can ask all the questions you want. If we can't answer it, we won't answer it, but
You got it.
we'll take note for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So any other questions on transportation update? All right. So moving on to our next Indian Point decommissioning update.
Yes, what you have in front of you and what's posted online are 3.5 pages of slides. These slides come from the Decommissioning Oversight Board, which last met on September 22nd. There's nothing worse than reading slides to folks, and so I'm not going to read any of the slides, but the top right corner of each slide are the slide numbers that came from the full slide deck. From the 22nd, but if you draw your attention to slides 34, 35, and 36, and 37, that's really the meat and potatoes of the discussion on the next recommended next steps. So it's important to understand that there are current monitors that have always existed at and around Indian Point. And it measures dust, it measures a whole lot of certainly hazardous material and radiological activity. Those monitors have always been in place. They've been in place in the radius around the plant forever, and that Holtec will continue to monitor even through decommissioning. Slide 35, a team of technical experts, both through Columbia University graduate students, but technical experts that serve on the state committee and served in a number of various capacities statewide and nationally, have called for additional monitoring, especially since the school's proximity to the power plant has been of concern. The second part, or the bottom half of slide 35, is really the focal point, is that the recommendations for monitoring on the fence. Basically, what that does, it's like tracking weather. And you want to know that the weather is coming before it gets to you, sort of the radar effect. So what the technical experts are suggesting is you need monitoring almost like a bullseye, very, very close, and intense monitoring, very close to where the demolition is happening, and move it out like the bullseye. They're suggesting that monitoring beyond the fence line may not be as useful for a number of reasons. One is interference. And one of the technical experts suggested that only having monitoring on school property, you actually get some false positives with emissions from buses and just other stuff that happens around school. you might get a reading that has an unintended consequence. So they really want to focus the monitoring around the plant and use that data and create a series of warning systems that would trigger a set of actions, not just for the school, but for the community. There are a lot of residents that live around Indian Point. There are municipal buildings around Indian Point, in addition to the school. The heavy demolition, this is important. We've heard from a number of residents. This is slide 36 about heavy demolition. There is decommissioning, which is the slow, methodical takedown of the plant, if you think of like Legos. And then there's the demolition, which is of the nuclear, the domes, which is where the nuclear power was generated. The timing of that is not to begin until late 23. Holtec, under the supervision of state and federal agencies, tested demolition. They have gone in and done sample testing of the concrete. They've gone in with a very fine drill and tested the air inside the domes. And so far they have not shared any concerns about what to anticipate when they take down the domes in their entirety. But they will continue to test. As I said, they test the air quality on campus, and they're going to test any of the dust that could be released through various samplings of the domes. So slide 37 is really the recommended next step. And the next steps include having a third party that will report to the decommissioning oversight board, but will have the opportunity to influence where the monitors go. This will be an independent group that will track the monitoring and will report back to all of the entities, to us, to the school community, to the larger Buchanan, and community around Indian Point. It's important to understand that there are a lot of residents that live closer to Indian Point across the river, perhaps, than even on our side. So this is an initiative that is going to include, that will be an effort that will include, there will be a multi-county effort and include multiple municipalities. So the timeline is that the state would put out an RFP later in November. We would go through the process of identifying this independent third-party agency to monitor the air and how they would report back. And you would see that the timeline to identify these folks, get them on board, have their recommendations not only made, but also purchase of equipment made and set up by December of 23, so in 14 short months. That would be in advance of the major demolition that would take place on campus. So this was the discussion back on September 22nd. There is another decommissioning oversight board meeting. I don't have it here when it is, and I don't have it in the phone, but that's the spirit of set of recommendations of the group. The technical experts have really led this effort because they do this, they do it for a living, and they have done it for a living. They've worked on nuclear power plants that have had schools and large municipal structures as close to the power plant as our school is, other more densely populated areas. So that is the recommendation as it stands now. We'll receive an update on this in the next meeting. I can certainly report back that you can come to the meetings. The meetings are now in person at the town hall in Portland, but they're also live streaming as well, and they're recorded. So all of these meetings, you can go to the New York State website, but they're more prominent. You can find them quicker on the town hall. They're long meetings, so you have to fast forward through a lot of different content. I think it's all important, but in terms of this discussion happened in the class maybe 45 minutes.
So has there been any progress on finding a national repository for nuclear waste? I know it was talked about a couple of years ago. And
yeah, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of hope that the feds would approve, I believe it's in Mexico, Yucca Mountain. And there's a lot of advocacy for that. In fact, I believe it's Holtec, don't quote me on it, been one of the leaders in trying to get that approved. And that they, have signaled to the industry and to the government that they would, they'd work on behalf of the government to run that operation. The issue is not whether or not the federal government will allow a repository, it's how do you get the spent fuel there? And how do you get it there securely and safely, because it would have to travel through multi-states, you have to have significant numbers of agreements. And I believe that the last conversation, this is probably over a year ago, felt the safest and most efficient, but certainly not timely transport would be by water. But that would not allow the spent fuel to get all the way there to the mountain in Mexico. They would still have to be land transport. So it's still an open discussion. I know over the last number of legislative sessions, there have been proposals to permit the federal government to explore those federal lands for this purpose. But I think some of the technical matters of it, it's great. It's great. We could use it. We have no way to.
So the camper, would they be responsible for reading the plan? If the monitors are triggered, or would we be working with Alteris? Like if God forbid something happens, the monitors are triggered. Who comes up with a safety plan for our roads?
They would be the ones writing the safety plan because of their technical expertise in terms of air quality with respect to potential release of radiological dust. They would be the ones with the authority to say this is what you have to do if based on science and research and their expertise. We would then certainly at VB, but really all of our schools would create any number of processes of how we deal with that, different protocols. Is it evacuation? Is it shut down the HVAC? And there are a lot of those questions we would have to explore after the recommendations.
Thank you. So I know we have this $500,000 grant that's going to help us install all of this. What's the cost to us after that?
Right now, the proposal that we heard from Columbia late spring last year, I believe there were 3 models and all of them are well under 500,000. And the technical experts, said even the Cadillac plans, is something we could do. That's just equipment. What the camp person would do, I guess, for lack of a better term, is they would be the boots on the ground to measure. So what we would need to do is after we receive the proposals, so we're into early 23, see what those cost proposals would be. I'd be inclined to say we have a budget of 500,000 for supplies, equipment, and personnel, and our budget couldn't cover that cost. Our recommendation would not be to cut corners; it would be to seek more resources from the state. Right? This was not a decision any of us around the table or anyone since 2017 when the plan announced the closure. So our position is the financial burden should now be borne by the.
So I thought the Cadillac plan, if you will, included monitoring because that third option was a company that has monitors already and they have that real-time trigger system. So I thought that for being under the 500, that covered the monitoring outside of the equipment, so we wouldn't break that delta.
Yeah, those proposals were supplies and equipment, not person. This would be an outside third-party agency that would be responsible for monitoring the monitors, I guess. I'm not using monitors too much, and be the fail-safe to report what the data are telling, whether it's to Holtec, to us, to the county emergency system, to the village of Buchanan, town of Portland. So this recommendation and timeline includes a team of individuals to physically do the work and be the boots on the ground. What Columbia came up with was really they priced out.
Okay, and this is not an ask for now. I think that it would be a good piece of information to maybe ask of this decommissioning team. In the other plants that they've decommissioned that are in areas similar to ours or in areas that are more densely populated than ours, what types of materials were triggered during their monitoring processes? How frequently did it happen? What was the range? So this way people have a level of comfort that, hey, this isn't the first time they did it, and here's what we experienced. So this way we can kind of assume that this is likely what we will also experience.
Yeah, and I'll ask for more concrete information.
Yeah.
That's how the conversation started, to say you gotta be really careful about monitors in a school or really, really close to a school. Because what they have found is that chalk dust, and we don't use a whole lot of chalkboards, but even dry erase dust can trigger it. Certainly exhaust from buses and some other things as well. So they have a much more thorough picture of that, but immediately they were able to say that even those sort of releases can increase in less classes, but I can move on.
Thank you.
That's it for questions, everyone's good? Now.
I found the email about the question, Cheryl asked about the
Transportation.
transportation online. It's 8.47%. The unallowable. I found a way of how they calculate. So for example, here, let's talk about Blue Mountain 371 AM. So it says the distance is 7.89 miles. Students transport
7.1.
7.9. Students transported 32. Student allowable pupils 32. Non-allowable pupils 0. Multiplier, that's a 1.5. And then pupil miles allowable 252.586. So that's how they make the calculation for every bus.
So they're logging every day. Sorry.
That's a
So
something I
every
don't
day,
understand.
They're logging how many
That's-
students they have, which makes sense because you want to know how many students you picked up, how many got off the bus.
That's the
Right.
answer. That's the
That's
question that
Yeah.
people ask. Please, to see if this is on a daily basis, they just pick things.
Yeah, is it a sample, or is it based on the number of kids on that ride? And
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if they're actually tracking. I've never seen.
I would think they would
First one.
have to, because you want to know how many kids you took in the morning to figure out how many you need to take home and whether you're over. Right, because it used to be.
No, you have to make sure you have them all covered.
You have to have a seat for every child, whether they ride
One way or
once or 180 days a year.
Because
But you
kids
don't
drive
even
one way.
know how many you had in the morning, because what if you end up with more than you had?
What I'm saying is you can't, you can't remove a child from the bus rolls because of lack of riding.
So we have to have a space regardless, so it really doesn't matter whether or not we have a student. For state aid.
No.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
We're not getting state aid if they're not riding the bus. So the question is.
No, I mean, I was for that, but how would anybody? I mean, unless you're logging it every.
That's the question. And again,
That's the question.
the question, for example, here is that they talk about 32 students.
Right.
Is that on one particular day? It's another, that's a question that I don't have the answer, and I need to ask please. How they counted those 32?
And how many kids were supposed to be on that bus out of the 30?
Right, how's that a
At
one day?
least-
You don't have
at
the
least-
daily report.
60, because if not, we will have a 72 passenger bus.
So think about that. So 50% of the kids we expected to be on that bus basically weren't. It's a 60-person
Yeah, but
route
that's
that had
gonna happen.
32 people.
But that'll happen all the time, when you pick up kids early for a doctor's appointment, or you drop them.
That was
off,
an AM bus.
Or, yeah, or maybe they have some after.
But that's the question about state aid,
or-
right?
Right, we,
Yeah, we can make this all we want.
No,
yeah, no, we just need to make.
Yeah.
We'll come back with them.
So
Thank you.
in the PM, that was the PM is only 0.60.
So they have to be logging this at every trip.
Again,
I think
at that particular day, at that particular whatever, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
thank
All
you.
right,
you know?
All right, we have a couple presentations. We put them into two documents, but it's really one larger conversation. I'd like to welcome Brady up to the podium. Armand is working on our building condition survey. He is the lead architect. I've worked on a number of projects with our school district for a number of years with KSP design. And great spring, and the board wanted to move forward with proceeding with the building condition survey a little sooner than the state mandate. We did an RFP, we interviewed various architects, and we brought Armand back to the family, back to the table here. We're very grateful. So we will turn it over to Armand to talk a little bit. I know we have talked a lot about building condition survey and capital project and all of those things. He's going to walk us through what a building condition survey is. His team has been in a number of the schools. They're going to be wrapping that up over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then talk about what do you do with a building condition survey? You build a 5-year plan and lead to a capital project, and we'll talk about potential timing and some opportunities we may have to consider that down the road.
We appreciate this opportunity to address the school board and the community. Primarily for a process for the presentation that talks about the purpose and need for the 5-year capital plan, how initiatives are underscored and make their way up for potential inclusion into a capital project, the best time for a referendum, and then also we did an example pre-bond schedule. And again, very preliminary, but to talk about the steps in the process to be required to move forward. So the 5-year capital plan is required by every single school district in New York State. They roughly run on a 5-year schedule, and the idea is to collect data and project out for 5 years the needs of the school district. I'm representing a big team of architects and engineers. We have, in addition to the architects, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, civil engineer, and structural engineer. We climb through the schools from the roofs to the basements, windows, roofs, mechanical ventilation, the condition of the finishes, furniture, everything in the school sort of comprises the building conditions survey. And then that's information that in a systemic format we report to the state education department. A living document, this just means that it's a document that you don't put on the shelf and forget about. We're updating it every year for the school year. We work directly with Anthony Molini as projects are picked off. We update cost, schedule, and so on. So this is really the roadmap for investment or reinvestment in your schools. We have facilities impact on the delivery of an education program. So we also look at the configuration of the schools and how they're supporting education programs and needs in the buildings. At the end, we prioritize those needs. So the list of potential items and costs will exceed typically what a school district is able to invest. But we make sure that investments can happen incrementally over time, and then you have a coherent, piece at the end of the day. So need is really created in 3 different categories. Aging infrastructure is far and away the biggest driver of projects and costs for public schools. So again, when I talk about in terms of code issues, ADA, Americans with Disability Access, all the engineering infrastructure and so on, super important. Changing enrollment can cause the need to put additions on schools, and then evolving education program needs. So when I think about when I went to school super long time ago, there were no computers in the classrooms, and that's sort of a really severe example. But how we integrate technology and how technology evolves over time is another driver of need. We invite everybody that's part of our underclassing community to be part of the process in terms of data collection for the 5-year capital plan. We will have a series of meetings like the one we're having tonight with the Board of Education. We meet on a regular basis with school district administration. I'll talk in a minute about a walk that I do with each school's principal through their school. We meet with staff, teachers. We try to also talk to parents and then students along the way. One of the hallmarks of our process is for me to walk the school with the school's principal. We've completed 4 of the 5 schools. This is really the opportunity for the principal to share with us how the building is performing in terms of supporting the education program. So, you know, you might hear anything from our art studio is slow, and we're having trouble supporting the program. We're having trouble with how we get our band and orchestra to fit out the stage. And that sort of on the ground information really helps us or arms us rather than offer design solutions to people. You know, student social and emotional needs have emerged, and they've always been part of the program, but they've really emerged as a discussion point these last 10 years. And we're cognizant of that. So, school districts have a number of methods to fund projects, and we've outlined 5 of those buckets referred to them this evening on the sort of the upper right annual capital budget. So the school districts will put aside money towards a capital fund, and then that's voted on to allow for the dollars to be invested in specific projects. Those are typically small to medium-sized projects. Grants and programs, so grants can come federal, state, and local, like we just heard the school board talking about a grant in connection with Indian Point decommissioning. And so there's another opportunity for investment. Energy performance contracts are actually Hendrick Custom Schools is engaged with an energy performance specialist right now. And I believe that project's in the planning stage, and we will be shortly, but that's another opportunity. And then Anthony has an operations and maintenance budget every year, and he's able to pick off smaller projects. So all the way at the top at 12 o'clock, in every generation or every period of a school district, there's a need to really tackle large capital projects. And again, typically, the need is created by older and aging infrastructure. The bond is a community referendum that invites the community to vote up or down, yes or no, about reinvestment in the schools. It may or may not affect taxes, and that's super important, and one of the lenses that we use to think about reinvestment in our schools. So we've studied a lot of the bonds that we've worked on over the last 10 years, and what we've learned is that items that are really critical to the mission of the school district are the projects that tend to bubble up and make it into the bond. And you'll see when we're at the end of this process that we'll identify many more needs that we can afford to reinvest in. But items having to do with safety and security, we tackled a lot of those in the 2018 bond, I'm proud to say. Infrastructure, I talked about how students learn, and then community facilities. So the recent synthetic turf field was a really great reinvestment that we did here at So we find, and again, this is anecdotal, but I think it's very prevalent in the public school community. School districts tend to find the most successful bond passage in May and November calendar year. So November, I don't mean next month. I mean, as an example, 13 months from now in November of 2020. November is a time that we've had 3 months to get back to school from the summer. We would typically build consensus in the spring and then work really hard on the details over the summer, and then come back and have the campaign in the fall. November is off cycle with your budget vote. The other philosophy is to have your community vote up or down everything on the same day. In May and vote on the annual budget and the bond on the same day, and that's also and there's no one size fits all. We have to decide together that's the so those were our prepared remarks in terms of process. If it's okay, I'd like to walk us through the steps, and there are a number of steps to build consensus towards a successful bond, and also to make sure that the bond checks all the boxes so that we're legally ready to have a community referendum. Visioning sessions with Hendrick Custom School leadership. So that's something that we'd like to work with the district administration to plan for in November. We want to really engage directly with all of you at the table to understand your thoughts and where you'd like to see reinvestment in the schools. The facility reporting or the building condition survey, we're working on that now, and we hope to have that rolled out by the middle of November, including costs. Balance balancing vision and cost, so we want to make sure that we really invest the money in a surgical way, and we bring forward the most important needs for the school district. Seeker stands for State Environmental Quality Review Act, so a special seeker planner will come to this school district, evaluate the scope of the projects, and then identify any potential environmental impacts. And again, there's no issues with that, just that we need to check that out. In this, and again, in this example, in January, after the new year, I would think that the very public part of the campaign would be underway. We have the secret work mostly complete, and we would be working with the school board to refine the final scope and cost. We would then, in end of March or early April, adopt the seeker and the bond resolution. There's a 45-day waiting period, which enables a legal community referendum on May 16th and 23, which is the same day that your budget comes along. I just summarized 100 different steps and needs that go into the pre-bond process. We've done this before together with the administration. This is sort of where we live, and we understand how to do this and to help sort of facilitate that process. Happy to answer any questions or invite comment from the superintendent or Anthony or Enrique.
He's cycling back. Building condition survey is an important document if we choose to do a capital project, because the state education department looks at that to make sure that it was identified as a need or interest in order to receive it. And the opportunity we have, and Enrique will talk about finance now, is for a lot of different reasons, namely in the point, our state aid has been increased over the next number of years. It's going to almost quadruple. So many districts around us receive state aid for capital projects in the 60, 70, 80%. So you see them always improving their facilities because they receive a lot of state aid. We have not been that fortunate over the last number of years. So our opportunity to go out for large scale capital improvements has really been diminished because of it has been cost ineffective and with more burdensome on taxpayers. So it's important to understand that what is in the building condition survey that is on file in the state needs to be there in order for us to receive aid on whatever priorities we have.
I have a question. I have a few, but I'm going to start with one because based on you're talking to the staff and you're talking to principals, has it been considered? Has our strategic plan been considered in this?
Oh, no.
Not, I know it's separate,
Yeah.
but if you're talking about educational needs and things like that, and that's being discussed, shouldn't that be part of this and what we're planning long term?
That would happen after the building condition survey is complete. If we want to consider a capital project. Because remember, building condition surveys, this is a status in your schools. If we choose to do something about it, yes, we're going to need a lot of stakeholder input to connect what needs to be done and what we would like to be done with existing teams, committees. One of them, the strategic plan, to say, okay, what do we believe or what do we want to recommend? So we're not there yet, and we're even 2 steps ahead. We would need to determine if we would want to do a capital project after we hear about the finances and after we receive the building condition survey. Those groups of stakeholders would be part of it, but we're talking what, maybe January?
I just want to also mention that when I spoke to the superintendent earlier in the week, he said, when are you ready to meet with me and my cabinet? I said, well, let me finish all the data collection with the stakeholders in the schools so that I can report that up. And I think that's when that convergence, with Joe's going to start to guide us. That's put a big preference or an emphasis on this, and maybe that's something that we'll talk about another time. That sort of stuff will definitely happen. I'm just not there yet. Yeah.
So I think this is wonderful. Thank you so much. I think you did a really great job explaining the process, and I'm excited to see how the survey comes out. Is this one of those situations where if
the board and the district decide to go through the capital project, that the state doesn't really tell you how much funding you get towards it? How does that work from a financial perspective? Because I know that a lot of the things you do, we're kind of like lingering in time, waiting to find out what the state funding will be.
Yeah, there are two pieces. One, there's state approval, which Armand has, it can be very laborious. So we're waiting, we do an architectural schematic design, send it to the state to say, will you approve it? They look at the architectural design, they look at the building condition survey, they said, yes, we'll approve it. Then it depends on what our aid ratio is at that time and the aid ratio when you borrow. And I know we're thinking.
Thank you. One more question. Yeah, and it's, I think it's an easy one. I think it's an easy one. Who, you say grants and programs, who writes those grants and programs for us? Like who writes grants, who puts in for grants for the Henderson School District? Is that district office? Is there groups? Do we have people on our committee?
That's really a catch-all that I put in
Okay.
the document, and it could be anything from the American Recovery Act that all our school districts received, during COVID, to the grant that you're talking about earlier, or it could be grant writing. Some districts have access to grant writers and that sort of thing. But it was just a demonstration of how projects are funded.
That's a great explanation. I was just wondering if we had anyone that we use internally for that.
Not what Armand's talking about. Armand's talking about grants, hundreds of thousands or millions to repair fixed lighting, sidewalks, like a grant. Our energy performance contract is part grant funded from New York State, so those are big ticket capital expenses.
But do we have anyone in-house that writes small grants?
Yeah, we work with our principals and administrative team with Entergy, with Pepsi, with many different things. But Armand's talking about big,
Yeah, I get what you're
not that kind of grant writing, more of federal and state money, like the New York State Dorm Authority, the Recovery Act, all of those.
I just had a quick question. When we did the last capital project, we were able to pay a little bit to get a more expedited approval. Does this fall under that also?
We could, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there, the third party review, we have to cross that bridge when we get there, if we choose to go forward. That would be an expense that would come on the project.
Thank you for calling it third party, because it's really not expedited.
Yeah. So the state has a less now, but a couple state employees that review plans. School districts, and this goes back to why we're doing our DCS now. We have to have a 5-year plan. What the state had said is, okay, every 5 years, 700 plus school districts do your plan. So the state was getting plans for capital projects basically within 12 months of each other. The state can keep up. And so a community would vote for a bond and say, we're going to do all these great things, and then you get approval for 8, 10, 12 months later, right? And so anxiety happened, we want things done yesterday. The state education department said, okay, school districts can pay for a third-party review, which basically is like a BCS. The state will approve architectural firms to stamp approval on plans on behalf of the state. That's proven not to a little quicker, but not really. But we would have to cross that bridge when we get there.
So our next update on this will be sometime in November.
Yeah, Armand will come back with final DCS and set of recommendations, and he mentioned earlier, and I want to give caution to everyone, it will be a very big number. And it will be things that many of us will not be able to see with our eyes. It's not going to be new stadiums and tracks and fields. It's going to be, it may include some of that, but a lot of it, and oftentimes the most costly stuff is, repairing driveways and parking lots and HVAC and plumbing and, so on and so forth. So guts and infrastructure are the most important and critical, and they're also the most expensive. For example, the high school a little over a year ago couldn't open on time. We had to start remotely for 2 days because of a significant storm that zapped out our computer system, that ran our HVAC. That was very antiquated. that is in need of repair and updating, and I know that would be in the BCS and it would be a big number. And so a large component of this, if we decide to move forward, is going to be a lot of time and commitment educating our community on what's on the BCS, why it's mission critical, and why we need that support.
Are we allowed to point? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
If I remember during the last report, every line item was rated based on criticality. Right, so that we could prioritize exactly what had to be done versus what we wanted to be done. Right, versus what would be nice to have.
Yes. Yes, I just would mention that part of our job is to make sure that stakeholders that we meet with understand that just because we're writing something down doesn't mean they're going to get it. That we're really clear about the process of bringing data to the school board, that the school board is the final decision maker, that there is a prioritization process, but it's all part of data collection. So we just I want to be certain that you do that we're not in the business of suggesting, we're listening and we're making sure that expectations are in check with the process.
Are we allowed to share things we would like them to include, or is it supposed to be hands off and it's only based on what you see? Like, how do you know what the community cares about?
That's not the community.
That's just the administration.
That's the administration.
Well, that's oftentimes the conflict, and that's not a great word, between Armand's job based on the state requirements and what we would all like to see. And that gap between what must happen or what can be funded versus what we would like to see would need to be negotiated amongst us to determine, could we petition the state to see if these things could be included in the BCS and would rise, to a certain level where the state would say, okay, we'll fund it or we'll reimburse it. For example, track fields, for a long time in New York State, artificial turf was not reimbursed. It took a lot of boards advocating for it to be reimbursable because they were able to prove it was safer over time, it was cheaper over time, got more playability over time. But that would be a conversation at the end of the BCS to say, what do we think is missing? And maybe Armand and his team go out, scope it out again, or, it might be a set of conversations and you may say, well, what's your wish list? But we may have to pay 100% rather than the 60%.
So we can, the opportunity to add from their original finding without knowing anything about who we are is available. That's really my question. Because there may be a big need for some, or an interest in something that they have no idea that we care about to make an improvement for music, right? Or something along.
Well, I think it's also very possible that the parents who are there all the time when you talk to their kids will notice things that maybe you don't, or the principal, right? So to get more input from community members who are in that building every day, on those decisions every day, might be helpful in finding, what did you potentially miss, or it just validates the fact that you found everything that you intended to find, and you did a great job.
Our last BCS, I think, came in around a little over $50 million, and we were for it. Because like, oh my God, there's $50 million of things we have to do. Well, some of them we really should. Most of them, probably delay, or as Armand said, some of his buckets pay out of a different bucket, not a capital project. At that time in 2016, when our building condition survey was done, we were still around 9 or 10% state aid. And so the board at that time had a really tough conversation of how much do we want the project to be, what should be in it, and what do we believe we could get support for.
And what do we think our state aid is going to be now?
30 to 40.
30 to 40. And is that going to be continual sliding scale? So do we get the report and do the 30 to 40 now? Or is that the goal, 30 to 40, or do we think?
No. Let me explain how it works. They go back 3 years. So this is going to happen within 2 years, because the first year that the first Indian contract closed, that's coming next year. So supposedly next year we're going to start getting 5-year stated. Then the following year, the second close, and that's when the big gap happens. So, and then it stops there. It stops there because, let's say, for the sake of it, that we get into a pilot agreement with all that $4 million. So since then, I went from 24 to 4. I lost 20 million. That's what the state would look at it, and I would lose the 20 million going forward.
But isn't the loss of income on us, oh, sorry, the loss of income on a sliding scale now? So we're continuing to lose more every year, right? We didn't lose it, isn't it, at 30%?
No, that's gone.
So they.
If there was a new pilot that gave us the $4 million. Those 3 years I thought.
Okay, got it.
So now that's what I'm saying. Let's say that we have a long-term pilot at $4 million. So now they can see 24 or 24, 4, there's a $20 million gap. Therefore, the assessed values went down X%. That's how much increase in state aid. That's why it takes 3 years for them to see the movement in assessed value and in revenue for them to say, okay, now this is your state aid going forward. Because if it were year by year, just imagine a factory closes for 1 year, they don't pay taxes, but then the next year someone else buys it. So they want a 3-year period to reassess the value of the school district and to give state aid. So we spoke with people at the state aid, and they told us that based on everything we told them, the $20 million difference, they believe that it's going to be 40%.
That's huge. So that 50 million bucks.
No. I'll explain that in my presentation.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question, only because we're just talking about how the principals are the ones that are most familiar with their buildings, but the current principals are not really familiar with their buildings, right? I mean, did we took a principal out of a building that was there for 10 years and put them in a different building, so did we talk to the principals that were in those buildings prior to this for those many years? And I mean, honestly, other than Mr. Giovanazzi, the acting principal of high school, they're all new. So
Because we've been the district's architect for a long time, we've worked in the principals and the previous schools, and we're getting to know them in the new schools. Anthony has his, really specific list of items that a lot of them are education related. And so we use that as a sounding board. So I feel like we've covered all the bases. Also, just as an example, right, at BV, we're hoping to get out to bid on the cafeteria renovation project. So we've been working in that school for a long time. So we've met with both the previous principal and then with Donna, we've met with Claire. Like we really, I think we have a good handle on the schools, and also we have a lot of clients that subscribe to the Princeton plan. And so we're going to be sharing with you some specific criteria for the elementary schools that are derived from your change to the Princeton plan. So I think really good question, and I'll be mindful about it, but I think there's a continuity to the listening to the process.
and also the middle school, right? Because we have a new principal there as well, who's not doing it. It's a very big building. I know obviously Anthony is very familiar with it, but
I spent a good part of the morning with Lawrence Collins last week, and she's great. We had a great, we met in her office and we physically walked the whole school. And again, in my previous partnership, we designed the addition of the Latin Middle School. So we've been working in a lot of your schools for over 20 years, and so I'm proud to bring that institutional memory to ask questions.
So the middle school field is going to be on the list.
Yes, sir.
Just saying. Careful. The geese like artificial turf,
they don't.
right?
They don't.
Yeah.
And you usually don't hear about that problem on that.
Awesome.
Hello.
My dog is that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so we have a few slides with a whole lot of numbers, and we give a little highlight of stole a little bit of Enrique's thunder, but he's gonna walk us through our school debt profile, various loans or borrowing, and bond payments that are coming off the scale, and some different scenarios for us to consider. So while Armand and his team wrap up their project, it's important to talk about what potentiality we have.
Thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, it's a lot of numbers, so please interrupt me if you don't understand, because it's just a lot of numbers, because that's what financing is, only numbers. So our debt profile today, you can see it. The maturity years are between 2022, 23 to 35, 36. This year, the three bonds are maturing, the $11.20 million bond that originally was issued in 2000, and then we refunded in 2012, and the 17 million that was originally issued in 2001, and we refunded in 2014. And then we have the $18.5 million bond that we need to refund this November for another year. So that's why I said estimated $1 million payment for this year. And then we have our energy performance contract that it's finished in 2024-25. We have a couple of small bonds that we issue for tax authorities, and we got a 2011 4.6 infrastructure, and then we have a $6.2 million in two tranches, and it was, I think, in 2014, 2015. And the reason we did two tranches was because a portion of it was technology, and the other portion was infrastructure. And we wanted to merge our assets with our liability, and technology doesn't last 20 years. So we said technology should last 7 years, so a portion of the bond was issued for 7 years, and the other portion was issued for 20 years. Next, please. So the net total debt that is coming due the next 3 years are the $11.2 million that have a yearly savings. We have a yearly savings of $1.2 million. Then you go down. Then again, you have total yearly savings from debt maturities between this year and 26 of $4.56 million. I'm talking about net because we also need to issue more. We need to issue for the $18.5 million that I estimate that the yearly cost is going to be about $1.5 million. We are starting to work on a new EPC that is going to be about $3 million, and that's going to cost us about $243,000. So the net yearly savings will be $2.8 million. Are you guys following me? Yeah. So let's see, this term is $2.8 million for only scenario one in replacing the two big bonds, and based on a state aid of 30% and 40%, depending. I just have different scenarios, different maturities, and obviously different rates depending on the maturity. We have, for example, if we decide to go 20 years, and we get state aid rate of 40%, the yearly payment of the 2.536, which is the addition of the payment that we make on the 11.29 and the 17, that will give us a potential capital project for $45 million. And I'm taking into account, so you know, so I like to be conservative, but only 9% of the project will be able. Because in order to be able, the project has to be in a building, in a building where the students are learning. So for example, I believe that there's going to have to be work in the post garage. That will not be able. So that's why I'm being conservative and saying 10% of our amount of the capital project is not going to be able. Okay, so here you have, then if we go to 15 years, obviously, we only have $37 million capital project. So here you have maturity differences, and obviously the rate will be different, but always the same yearly payment of $2.5 million. So that will bring no tax increase to the community.
I just ask, so how is the rate calculated? Is it prime plus something or?
No. Prime is short. This is long term. I spoke with our bankers and I asked them, we are A+ by S&P. Tell me other municipalities that have raised money in the last month or 2 months, at what rate? That are A+.
So Fed funds rate has no impact on
Oh, no.
these projected rates?
This goes against the 20-year treasury, the way they market the treasury flow. So the 20-year treasury flow. So Fed funds always have a little bit of influence, but not in the long, at the long term.
Okay,
So Fed funds is always at the short.
so this is indexed to T-bills. Okay.
Here.
All right, and just to clarify, so this is just the potential for no increase in tax, but if we decide to spend less, it could potentially be a reduction in taxes too.
Of course. Yeah.
And what districts typically try to do is match the borrowing with retiring debt, so that our tax bills and stays relatively flat. So I think it was just the other day, a district somewhere around us is considering, or the board voted to go ahead with a small capital project because they had retiring debt. They had opportunities they wanted to improve their facilities. So that would be an opportunity for us as well.
But also reducing taxes for people could be an opportunity.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
You can do nothing and you reduce 4% in tax a year.
Well, for that year, because eventually the percentage is relative to the year of budget, right?
Yeah, but it's staying there. If next year your taxes go down
4%.
4%,
Then they would baseline.
your baseline is, let's say that your taxes were 100 today, next year is 96, your baseline is 96.
Right,
Like
right,
that.
96.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the idea here, what the board wanted to see is how much can we raise, we build without impacting the tax.
Yeah.
And in the second scenario, in the next page, I'm using all the net debt, which was 2,880,000.
You're using all of the what?
Net debt.
Thank you.
Which is $2.8 million, having the same scenarios. And now you go to, if we're deciding to do a maturity of 20 years at 40% state rate, we can go up to $51 million. Well, we don't leave any rights out there in case there's a meeting in the next 20 years. After that. Well, again, I just wanted to show some areas where much better off than what we were back in 2018 when we did the 18.5. Because it's really, it's really putting us between 30 and 50 years old. For those players.
This is really helpful.
Presentation. Yeah.
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next section tonight is audience comments on agenda items. All right, Brady, you know the rules around here, right? 3 minutes and the board is here to listen, so have at it. We'll take down anything that we can't respond to, we'll be taking down and we'll definitely close the loop. Yep.
Thank you. My name is Therese Sinks. I have 2 children at Blue Mountain Middle School. I've been here before. I really was hoping not to have the comment tonight. I see elementary school transportation on the agenda, but not middle school. And I was here 3 weeks ago expressing my concern about my kids on a middle school bus. And I did not hear much about what's being done for that. So I'm not as buttoned up as I usually like to be, so forgive me. Mr. Hochreiter said that he believes there's no more than 60 children on a bus. I don't know if he was referring to elementary school. I asked Mrs. Gillio when there are 62 children on my children's middle school bus. Now, that is what is planned for. I can tell you the reason you are not seeing the numbers that are planned for is because parents are driving their kids in because the buses are ridiculous. They are so overcrowded. And you're not talking about the little kids. You're talking about kids that are my size, kids that are bigger. They're coming on their instruments. They've got 3 binders in their backpack. They've got sports bags or whatever else they have. So I really am disappointed, to be honest, that it wasn't even a thought to address middle school specifically. And it was said at the last meeting, this was an unintended consequence that the middle school bus runs are now impacted by the Princeton plan. And that's exactly what it is. Nobody saw this coming. I certainly didn't, which is why I kept my nose out of the whole battle around Princeton plan. But now, I really try to stay out of a lot of this stuff, but when it's impacting my kids and they're begging me to drive them to school, which I can, I have that flexibility. But on principle, I shouldn't have to. There are many parents that can't. So I'm not, again, I will say, I am not throwing the transportation team under the bus. I never would, no pun intended. But I think that they are in a rock and a hard place. They are trying to back into a number for savings or whatever in regard to the Princeton plan implementation at the cost of not only these kids, but your drivers. And I after the last meeting, I sent a note to the board specifically asking, 1, that transportation be on the next agenda. It was, but not middle school. But 2, for metrics from Liz. Can she tell us what is the capacity? I got it from her for my bus, 62 kids out of 72 on my kids' bus. But can we look at that broadly? Can you share that with not only the board, but the parents? Are we tracking on-time arrival and departures? How are you tracking the number of kids on each school bus that are getting on and off? Well, on really in the morning. You just said you have no idea, and you need that for state funding. I don't know. Start counting heads on the videos. I don't know. But my point is, there's a problem here. And I'm grateful that the elementary school is being addressed because they are much younger. But it is not fair to the middle school kids to be getting on the bus and looking at a bus that is so overcrowded. And they're just like, oh, particularly the kids who get on later. So I just ask that we really look into this. And again, I go back to, if Liz is talking to the drivers, fantastic. Talk to the parents, do a survey. See if you can figure out how many kids are getting driven in. I know of 4 on my kid's bus.
Thank you, Teresa. Yeah, we will circle back with Liz on middle school.
And if she could come and, or I'd be happy to talk to her again. I'm not throwing her under the bus, but I think we need to have some numbers here.
Yeah.
How many routes were eliminated, and what were the knock on it?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good to see you, Teresa.
Thank
Anybody else, Carmen? No, nobody else has it. All right, so we've got through the agenda and now we're on to committee reports. Does anybody have any committee reports? That is next. Don't worry.
All part of the agenda.
So committee reports are specific to our committees that we're on. I don't know if anyone's attended any.
Jeremy and I were at the safety committee meeting. Obviously, safety, we can't go into specifically, but we met with local law enforcement and our security experts. Going over a lot of the standard stuff they have to do with the new year, about staff training, the required drills in the buildings. But then really focusing on increasing and normalizing of having the police at a drill so that they're familiar with our buildings. It was a really productive meeting.
New technology being implemented. There was a big piece that Westchester County Police presented on some of the new technology that have been implemented and how it's beneficial. There's a series of stages. We did stage 1, which is sort of a broad stroke. They were really excited, as with some of the other results. Canon is sometimes seeing the committee, and they were excited to see that we were taking these steps. Yeah.
Great.
It was my first committee meeting ever. I was excited. Okay.
Yeah.
It was good.
Always sounded productive.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a funny story. I was patting myself on the back. I walked in, I thought it was 1 minute late, and I was like, yes, I did it, and it was actually 16 minutes late.
Great. I think that's the only committee that's actually met so far, so maybe more next time. I do have, so now we're gonna move on to board comments and new business. Before we get into some NISBA with the stuff that we have to go over, I just wanted to talk about I know I kind of emailed out information to the trustees about PTA meetings, and basically, long story short, the past few years, there's been this like stigma of there's always a trustee as a liaison for PTA meetings, and we always try to be there and be present and pay attention to what's going on. But that's really all it is. It's been a sitting duck, really, listening and trying to be supportive, but yet not speaking on behalf of the board or taking the PTA meeting out of context and sharing it publicly and having your own perception. So I decided that as president this year, it was really important to me to meet with the PTA council. And they were very receptive to it, and they had some asks for us, which I shared with everybody, and I want to share here tonight. That whoever the liaison is comes to the board meeting and participates and shares, maybe some achievements of the board or new initiatives, how our most recent board meeting went, what's on, maybe the next agenda, if parents want to tune in or come and be present or speak. Be able to answer questions, nothing that's particular to your perspective on a policy or how you would vote on it, but simple questions. And if you don't know how to answer it, you just jot it down and we'll circle back. So I'm hopeful that everybody here is interested in more of an active role with our PTA, because they're doing so many amazing things for our students throughout the year. And if anyone has any questions on their role with a particular PTA, I'm happy to talk about it later, offline, here, whatever. And the most major takeaway is that the PTA really wants to come on occasion, maybe 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring, and have an opportunity to present. I know this was like mixed feelings over the years, and it's not for any particular, one reason. It's just a matter of making sure that we're fair to everybody out there that would like to maybe have an opportunity to present. I don't know, Joe, you have any perspective on history there, but I love the idea. I think it's a great
forum for them now that we live stream. And we get 200-300 viewers, so I think it's a great way to just get out some big highlights for the district. The PTA literally is one of our probably most large and active bodies. And I liked it, but I think it's important that the trustees kind of have a chance to weigh in with their opinions on this topic. So if you want to go around, if anyone has questions for me about my meeting with them, I'm happy to answer.
I'll start. As a former PTA leader, for many, many years, this makes my heart very happy. Because the PTAs really work very diligently and very hard on programs for our students. And they work very closely with the school. And they're the biggest advocacy group for children in the country. So I think this is fantastic. And I think having this also goes with our community and building the community, the presence and all that. So this is great.
They were very excited about the opportunity to present to the board and the community kind of all at once, because otherwise you have to attend every single PTA meeting to find out, really what they're doing. Does anybody else want to weigh in?
I just want to make sure that we're being fair to all of our, I know that PTA has a special place as our advocacy group, they encompass all of our parents. But once we allow that privilege benefit to one group, we have to make sure that we're doing it, whether it's the sports booster club or the parents, there's an art parents and art council. So we just need to make sure that we are keeping that door open for all of our student groups and not particularly just the PTA.
But I think that's the whole point here, right? We're opening our meetings up so that we can get more community involvement and more presence. So I think that's a great point, but we've been doing that. It's actually part of one of our board goals, right? So I think
I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I want to say as far as being a PTA liaison at the meeting, we have to be very careful to only speak on fact-based things. When I was at the Blue Mountain meeting last month, I talked about some of the agenda items that were really coming up. I introduced myself, but we can't get into anything where you're representing your personal opinion. It might be in it, that might be representing the board. So I know that that's in one of the conflicts in the past.
Yeah, and I think that like you need an example with that. So being on the PTA meeting for FGL and they bring up the transportation challenge at the beginning of the year, I can't be like, oh, as the board president, I am so upset with the transportation and that type of thing. We want to make sure that we are speaking to facts in detail and not giving our opinion or our perspective. Because that's what it's appropriate.
I love the idea, and I just think that being at the Blue Mountain Middle School PTA with you, we're all parents up here. We're Board of Ed members, but we're parents too, and we care about our kids. And we care about your kids, so when we're at those meetings, I just like to say, I'm talking as a parent, not as a Board of Ed member. And
Yeah, and that's fine too. When you speak as a parent, you absolutely have every right to speak to whatever the topic is and give your opinion as with your parent hat on. And it's just about being clear and communicative and making sure. I mean, a lot of the PTA folks know that we are parents and board members. So that was that. And I think also too, my experience on the board is that we ask the PTA for more than anybody. And we ask a lot of them. So this relationship and taking it to a closer, more, partnership level, I think is really, really important for the success of the school district. Corey, you go.
I agree.
You're good. So before,
There's nothing else I can add to what was already said.
okay, cool, awesome.
I support it.
So I was considering reaching back out to PTA leadership to ask if they would like to prepare for November or December, what works for them. I mean, we're already in October, and I know that they'll need to figure out what their important highlights are or what they want to share with us. So if we're all in agreement, I would like to contact them. I'm sure they're watching. All right, great. So that's PTA. The next, anybody else have any new business besides the two items that are listed here? All right, so we have to get through,
Well, I have a question.
yeah,
Board comments now or after?
what, that doesn't matter.
Oh,
Okay, don't let me close the meeting. And forget. Okay, so the first on here is the Area 10 Director nomination between Cheryl Brady and Deborah Gotti. I shared out, both of their resumes and information on them. I also what the Area 10 Director does. I have to vote on behalf of our district or our board, in November. So if nobody feels that there's a consensus on how we go forward, we can definitely talk about this at a later meeting. But I don't know if you guys want to weigh in on who you'd like to nominate. Yeah,
I nominate Deborah Gotti.
okay. Does anybody else have a thought, opinion? This is one of those things where I have a hard time figuring it out based on paper. Ally?
I worked with Cheryl Brady, so I was gonna nominate Cheryl. I've only ever met her virtually, but I know that she has a longstanding history working with her district and Westcott. So because I feel like I know her, I feel like she would represent our district well.
Are there any questions that people like that the trustees might have that we need to answer, or I'm kind of like, I'm feeling.
so. That sounds stupid, like, how does it really impact us who is nominated, and does it ultimately make a difference in the enterprise school district? And it's okay if you don't, but that's my thing.
No, I don't know the answer to that question, but I was just looking at Deborah Gotti's resume, and I was looking at Cheryl's resume, and I was just looking at the experience level. That's the reason why I nominated Deborah Gotti. She has more years experience in it than Cheryl. So that's where I went, and actually formatted the resume.
I like that. HR, do you have any perspective on this, like how it
Well, in
impacts?
terms of the role and responsibility of the director, their communication vehicle. NISBA operates like BOCES does. There are BOCES throughout the state. There's the district superintendent that works with the state, comes back and reports back. So that's sort of the job function. I think it's really a comfort level, and whatever you read on the resume or whatever information you have. I know we have used Westcott, and it may have been when Cheryl was around, to advocate, especially for our school district, given the point and some of the other unique financial issues that we were facing. So it's an important job, but for the most part, these areas are geographically divided, and oftentimes districts in the same geography have some of the same issues. Ours is a little unique given the enrollment. I think what you see is what you get. It's a gut decision. But to answer your question, yes, these are people that we would communicate with. Say when you go to Albany, or when you meet with NISBA or so on and so forth, or we need some resources here, or support or technical expertise, they are adopted.
And that would be another plug for Deborah Gotti, just because she's not part of Rockland with what my power plant closing. So she went through all of that. I also looked down at her PTA council, that she was the president of the PTA council from 1998 to 2005. So I think, yes, White Plains, but White Plains is very different than the Hendrick Hudson School District. So I was looking at those factors and how she represents.
We should be for Jen. All right,
We have
so
time on.
we have time. I think it's like the middle of November, and I have to fill out like an electronic ballot for Jen or whatever. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Now we have our proposed resolutions that Erica's gonna walk us through.
Okay, so we have to vote on, there's two parts. The New York State School Board Association has proposed 43 resolutions. And there is a book that coincides with it It's in the board doc for anyone that wants to read it or review it. And they put WISBA, the Westchester Putnam School Board Association, then met and discussed all 43 resolutions. And they came to a consensus. And in this document that you're looking at right now, it says whether they had a meeting, WISBA had a meeting consensus, and then we have to vote on it. So how we're going to do this, and just to give everyone a little idea on the timeline here. There is the New York State School Board Association annual business meeting. It's coming up next week on Monday. And we have appointed Jen Bacher on behalf of the board to cast our one vote for our district. So, and we have all previewed all of this ahead of time. So there are certain things that we may want to discuss as a board on the table that we have questions on for clarification. We can also abstain from, no decision. We can have no decision if we can't come to a consensus. It's a yes or a no. So I don't think this should take us very long to do. But what I'd like to do is I have to read this, and I'm gonna start. Anyone,
You have to start first.
yeah, and anyone after we start, anyone that has any of these, if they want to flag and discuss, they're all numbered. So
as you go, number one, if we have a question, are we saying
I
that or just circle it?
we're just gonna go back. I think you guys are gonna just go back to.
Okay.
It's all up there.
Okay.
All right. Proposed resolution
Motion to
amendment,
waive reading.
Second.
all in favor?
So you're gonna look through like number one, so you can all read and follow along. Yeah.
Well, I don't think I want to read all of them, right? That's the whole thing.
No,
But you should say number one, and then
We're gonna
Well,
vote.
unless you disagree with what they're proposing. Right, so each recommendation has whether, they're opposed or whether there's, support or whether they oppose.
Yeah.
So if you disagree with any support or opposed, that's what we should talk about.
and the three no decisions they can talk about. right?
Exactly. So if you want to talk about them, you can do it out of order, and it should make it easy for everybody. All this stuff is available on board docs for any of the public that wants to read about this, but we already have these in advance and then we're already.
Yeah, the public has had them in advance.
So, for example, 8 and 9. Were we opposed to those based on?
I think we have to vote. So I'm gonna do what Valley saying. I'm gonna say one. And we're
Okay,
gonna vote. And if we can't vote, we're gonna.
talk about it. Okay, good, let's do it.
One.
So the votes could be support or not support.
Okay.
So
Support or oppose,
support or opposed. Okay.
Not no decision.
We can do no decision, but no decision is, we're not going to, you're abstaining from voting, which is fine. If you have no opinion, you have no opinion. Right?
We need four to move forward.
Important vote. All right, so number one.
support.
Opposed.
No decision.
Yeah. I'm over here.
No decision.
I don't know.
So I oppose it because it's an unfunded mandate. I think this is great.
No, they're
action.
not. It's fully funded.
Fully state funded arts.
It's fully state funded.
The comment. Yeah,
I oppose it because there's a teacher shortage, and these are the teachers that you are the hardest to find, because no one went into these jobs because of why they want to mandate it. Because if they're the first to go when there's problems with budgets. So you mandate this. How about you put part of teacher for it? Try to find a home and careers teacher right now.
This is music and art.
Yeah.
It's
You're gonna
but
need
it's
teacher
music.
money first.
This is specifically music and art.
Yeah, but I'm telling you right now, we're looking for elected teachers. And if someone in human resources could back me up on this, these are very hard to find. So you mandate this, and then you don't have the teacher to put in there. I'm for it. I'm all for arts and music. But it being mandated, once you mandate something, you're not going back from it. And right now, that mandate, you're not finding these teachers out there right now.
So we can do SA, support if amended, maybe that it's fully funded but not
But that's,
mandated.
but it says it in, there. It says fully funded.
No, but,
No, but
no,
I-
it says fully funded and mandated, so the amendment would be supported, right? So what I'm saying is there's four choices at the top of the page, right? Support, support if amended, oppose, or no decision. So if you can
It doesn't-
support the resolution if amended, and the amendment would be that it's fully funded but not mandated, then
Yeah.
it sounds like that covers
Yeah.
all angles here. So when we have the access to the teacher, we can, and then we're not deficient if we don't have someone to
I
cover
don't
it.
see anything that
about
says
mandated.
mandate. I don't.
Doesn't say mandated at
It
all.
says fully funded arts and music education program as a common school branch incorporated into the public school curriculum to provide a more well-rounded education for children. It probably doesn't even have an impact on this district, but it would be more so, because we already have it. It would be more so for those other schools across the state that don't have it. And I think that would be absolutely fantastic for them, because we have a great arts and music program. They might not.
Okay, see, but when I look at this and read, the first line says it is not a statutory requirement. As a result, during times of fiscal difficulties, school districts, they reduce arts and music. If I-
They're trying to protect
We're
the
talking about
program.
hen hut only.
And
We're only talking about hen. For us to vote, we're only talking about hen hut only. So we went through the biggest crisis that we're gonna see, and we didn't cut single music, right?
I don't know that.
Well,
No,
you know, we preserved, right? We've been preserving. Our music department's pretty strong here.
And then in the end, maybe this would end up giving us money for a program that we're already funding. This would give us state funding.
Part of the issue here is that arts and music, instruction and standards are mandated. Those standards being taught by certified art music teachers now. So what some districts have done is to say, well, we don't have enough money to pay for a kindergarten and first grade art. But students are entitled to art instruction. And so they find different ways to do it. This may be requiring, I'm looking at the asterisk on the very last page. Yeah, that it talks about mandating it as a perhaps certified teacher. I don't know enough about I don't know enough about the resolution and why Dutch is supposed to. It's providing it. I can tell you that certified art and music teachers teach all our children.
I think as written, I totally, you're coming full circle and I'm almost there with you with supporting it. But I don't think it's written well.
Yeah, well, that's not for us to say,
Yeah.
right? That's not up for us to say. But
Okay.
that's also, I mean, that's where the amended comes in, right? Right, if we don't like the way it's worded, like, there's one in here that I don't like, I can tell you right off that, the wording of the bad.
So what should we do about this one? Stick with,
I think we should vote on, okay, who supports it? Who supports it if it's amended? So I think that's right.
Okay.
okay.
this is gonna be-
Whoa.
We-
There's a lot.
it's like-
Okay.
Can we just focus on the ones where we
Yeah.
disagree with the
That's what we're
recommendation?
doing.
Okay,
That's what we're gonna do.
thank you.
So two,
Very well.
two,
We're good.
we should vote two.
Oh,
Oh, so we're voting.
We have to, we have to just show. Okay, three. Four, support.
Support.
Five, support.
Whether you're against that.
Yeah.
Six, support. Seven, support. Eight was one that, eight is one that they opposed bylaw amendment of resolution. NISBA supports universal pre-K for the 3, and 4-year-olds statewide. So who supports this? Who supports it with, if it's amended? Who opposes?
Isn't it already?
Nope. Not at all. Not close.
It's just because we got to fund the federal.
We
fund.
got $138,000, $134,000.
But it's not funded by the state, but now it's federal.
You better look at number 28
Yeah, they're connected, and that's another one that's opposed.
or 28 is.
No, it's not 28.
Yeah.
It is 28.
Or 28.
Equitable.
yeah, but what is that? Is that
Yeah, what is-
equitable, like?
So that means
everyone
down-
gets the same, or everybody gets what they need to fund?
Equity is everybody gets what they need. So then
more.
I think the difference is mandating that you must do it versus making sure you have the funding necessary to do it if you choose.
Yeah, I'm not for mandating. They don't support mandating.
Okay, no, but that, I don't know, not in that one. So. Who is, we're at opposed, who's opposed? 9 was another one that we had some questions on, and they have an O. Ms. Michelle petitioned New York State Education Department and Commissioner thereof to include as mandatory prerequisites being employed by a school district in the state of New York as a licensed security guard, that said individual receives as part of their training and licensure a separate and specific credential signifying training and knowledge of laws, rules, and regulations applicable to school. And this had to do with training. They're not trained specifically in this. And this is written, it's all explained in the book.
Yeah, so the school district would then have to pay for that training, which employee, plus we have to fingerprint that.
That's already done at their security. That's done.
Right, but this is a whole added expense. That's gonna, I
don't know what training,
It's an unfunded, so what's the star on this one?
it's that you don't know what the training is gonna be. And when you have no idea, it's committing to.
I have a question. Why does the school have to pay for it? Like, the school doesn't pay for your teacher certification, you pay for that if you want to be a teacher.
We pay for the training, for like the safety team training or training for.
But if you want to be a licensed security guard, then you need to pay the courses for you to be able to achieve that level of a profession.
and if I have that certification, you're gonna pay me more. And you're probably not paying them what they would make, say, at Indian Point as a licensed security guard.
That's the issue. The issue here is there's not enough information that they're saying on the asterisks, no one knows how much training we're talking.
Yes.
And ND with amendments?
That's the issue.
What are you
This
saying?
one is support.
The first problem here is that would be a civil service job. For civil service, this would be completely different in Westchester than in Portland than in any other one. And for us, that's also number because our school resource officers, they get the training at the county to be school resource officer. My opinion, this doesn't matter to us.
So are we ND? We're gonna be ND? ND, we consent on ND? Sure. Number 10. Support. Number 11. Support. Number 12. Support. Number 13. We had some questions on that.
Like, that was one we were like, isn't that a renewal?
Yeah.
Kind of strange.
Support, just.
Yeah.
I oppose, because now you might think like I'm some creepy person over there, but I'm gonna say, if it said knowingly in here, but you think of your young teacher who's 21, who doesn't know all the students, and I'm telling you, I mean, I thought it, I remember being in Bolton's with kids with fake IDs in there when I was 22.
So you would support this
If it said the word knowing, if it said that the worker had to know, or a district employee knowingly. There's a lot of times that people misrepresent their age.
With the current student in the district, regardless of age and consent, that's what it's saying. So if the student is 18 or 19, they would still be prohibited, they would make it a felony for doing that. Even if they were adult or
Right.
of age of consent.
Yeah.
I support this.
Well,
don't
can I
know.
ask one question? If you are a teacher aide in kindergarten, you have no idea that there's a student who's a senior you can be a student at 20 years old in public school in New York State.
Actually, they extended it because of the pandemic, I believe.
So you could be a
23 or
20-year-old teacher aide in kindergarten classroom. You could meet someone who's 21, you are senior, and go to jail. But I'm saying you could even meet someone who's 21, you're senior, and go to jail.
With a current student in the district.
Yeah,
Yeah, but they're
That's my
currently,
point. So a 20-year-old senior, just think about the law for a minute, right? I'm not saying that what I support, what I'm saying is, think about this, you could be a 21-year-old student, you could be a 20-year-old teacher aide.
Yeah.
You could meet someone in a bar, have no idea that they're in your district. What's the big district? New Rochelle.
But how do you
Right,
prove
yeah.
it one way or the other? Coming from a-
You don't,
That's
that's
the
why,
point.
that's.
You don't want to give someone a felony.
So maybe you add some work
Knowingly.
in there.
That's it.
Knowing,
Knowingly.
Well,
if you know that there were.
you can't prove knowingly, right? There's no way to prove knowingly.
They're in your class.
Yeah.
You're a coach. You're a coach.
You can
and you're
say, I didn't know.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I'm
there's no-
coaching you.
Legally, there's no way to.
But
prove
see-
knowing. It's
Okay.
it's a
So then you
very,
need to put something.
It says current student in the district, not necessarily in the classroom.
Right.
And it's also a felony, which I think is.
And you lose your license and you, listen, the intent of the law, I'm full of.
Not necessarily, you would have to do a part 84 and your state would have to determine. your license. The state education department, you know, the whole way.
I mean, the intent of the law is there and I get the intent of it, but I think that you're going to. You're,
Unintended consequences. You
there's
gotta
not,
think
and
about it.
there's no gray area, you just told me, you can't prove knowing, there's no, it's either black or white. So even if you didn't know. And his situation happened, I have a felony.
Well, it's not really my situation, the one that I.
Yeah.
One of these is upset. Hate to hear it, upset.
18 shades of red.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Can only imagine what's going on.
Are we saying that we support this with, so who supports it?
I did, I get what Jeremy's saying, but
I did too, and now I get, I don't know what they're saying, but at the same time, I mean, if there's a 21-year-old student in the district, the teachers are probably gonna know, because there probably aren't that many of those, right?
That's.
We got teachers who don't know each other here.
Yeah, I get that, but so wouldn't they know that if there's a student?
No.
If you are an elementary school teacher, why would you know? who-
You wouldn't know.
So here's the other thing. This is where this is what my question was on the form, I think. At the end of the day, the district could have a policy to terminate you. But I don't know that you should make it a felony. That's a pretty severe,
We can't have a policy, it's gotta go through.
you can have a policy that disallows anyone employed by the district to date a student.
That,
yeah.
but in terms of leading to, but even, you can have a policy on it, but in terms of discipline or termination, you've got to go through the state, existing state process. Violating.
Which you would have to do with a felony anyway, right?
Well, but we don't do law enforcement, they've got to determine.
Yeah,
what's a
I
crime.
don't think.
We don't determine what's a crime.
Okay, so,
All right,
so let's support this as it is. Who
I think with
supports-
amendments, we don't know what the amendments
who
are.
supports it with amendment?
In principle, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right?
It's not.
In principle, it makes sense.
100%.
Who is opposed?
Like,
I would say.
in context, I don't want any,
I would say support with amendments.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
When they support it with
I wouldn't
amendments,
oppose it.
when they support it with amendments, we get to vote it on again.
Again, right?
I don't.
See, I don't think so. I think you are voting on this language, otherwise we're gonna be here all night picking up the same. The essay here is that, I would, that's the end.
I wouldn't say,
You want this,
I'd say ND, not a.
Hang on. Everyone has to agree though on that.
That's what.
Do you want
I
to
would-
abstain or do you want to oppose it? Or they're two different things.
I oppose, but there's 6 people here, so
Well, you oppose,
I
oppose.
I'm voting on no decision.
I vote no decision.
I don't know.
That's what.
14, we're, yeah. 15. We had questions on this and they have it as a no, which, is that they oppose the bylaw. So but they did it with an asterisk. So just to clarify this, it was difficult for all special ed parents to afford a trained advocate. So that was RISBA's comment on here and why they opposed it. Because this is supporting, special ed advocates.
Unfunded mandate.
No, because a parent advocate isn't paid, right? I mean, Lisa. Parent advocate for special ed, that's not something that we would pay for, that's something a parent would bring. Parent pays that.
So then, if not every parent can afford that.
That was,
But it's all sliding scale. If you're talking an advocate, educational advocate versus a lawyer. So they'll go to typically in Elmsford, there's someone that doesn't have a sliding scale.
Based on your.
I feel like I don't have enough.
I don't have, yeah.
So,
You're voting on the language.
so yeah, we're voting on the language. So who supports this? Who supports it with amendment? Who opposes it? 16.
Oh, no, oh, sorry,
I oppose.
I oppose.
Yeah.
I support it, and I'm gonna say that I support it because I think it would increase diversity in Board of Education members. And right now, there is no diversity. I think that that's just my opinion, but that's it.
And I'm gonna comment, just because Jen had made some comments, I don't want to speak for her, but her comment on it was, you know, if this was something that was agreed upon, then we could, the person that, like, let's say I wanted to donate my money back to school, I could do that. I could, you know, pay it forward. And I think, like we said, it does bring more people possibly to the table.
Yeah, but my opinion on that is like so strong in the other direction. I think that you really want people here serving the community and their complete free will with no money tied to
No
it.
ties.
And then you
Totally.
become biased by, you know, by the money and by your connection because it's a paid job. So I'm a hard oppose.
I agree with that, but the stipend that they're gonna give you,
I mean, I would like
it's
it.
probably gonna be.
It doesn't specify that.
It's true.
Stipend is
Very
very,
usually locally decided, so you would pass a resolution to pay yourselves.
Sort of like a local, like town does, right? And next thing you know, it's $2,000 and it's $10,000. No, I'm out.
Well, they couldn't come to a decision at the table on that themselves with us. So we can, anyone support it?
I support it.
Anyone opposed to it? 17? Support. Support. 18. Support. Oh, well, I don't. support that.
18, oh, sorry.
18?
18, I am fully for the veterans. But what if you're in a town that has a tremendous amount of veterans? Well,
Getting reimbursed.
Yeah,
It's state reimbursement, so it's not a.
so the town doesn't have to pick that up?
No,
What
not,
they're saying is the state will reimburse the
Exactly.
district for taxes. exempt.
Okay, I support, sorry,
support. 19. Support.
yeah.
Or
20. They couldn't come to a decision on the 20.
I was no on this one. This is not a school board of ed thing, yeah, we should check.
Great. That was my
How I
comment.
felt.
That's on Jeremy, yeah.
So I'm a no. And who supports it? Who's a no? So let's see for support.
I got a cousin part of it.
21. Support. 22. Support. 23. Support. 24. Support. Sorry. 25. Support. Wait. Yes.
Did you guys memorize these? or what?
I did, I went through all of them 3 times. I have my, 26, support. 27, support. 28, support.
that was related to the other one.
Yeah, 28 is connected to the,
Right, so that was the one where this is the equitable funding, where if you choose to have a pre-K program, you will receive funding equitable to the cost. Right
Yeah.
now, pre-K funding is a flat rate across the state, obviously.
Yes,
So it doesn't go as far as that.
29, support. 30, support. 31, support. 32, support. Now, the next few are ones that they oppose, that New York State is recommending, but the Westchester Putnam School Board group opposed. So I'm just gonna go through these and we can talk if we need to. 33, who supports it? Who's a no? Opposed? 34.
Not our issue. Yeah.
35. Who supports it?
This is a health, this is a board of.
No.
Yeah, it's a board of health issue.
Well,
That was our big issue. Like, it was, we were told what to do. Let's keep it as being.
Yeah.
what to do.
Okay.
yeah, but, so hold on, if you disagree with the state, you have no choice.
Well, it's basically that, this relates to the pandemic. If you look at some, the districts that recommended, these were districts that wanted to have local control over quarantine, mask mandates, social distancing, so on and so forth. So they wanted to basically ask the local control in terms of communicable illnesses. And I think what NISBA is saying is we oppose that because that's not the core competency of the school district, is to be the health department. We have a health department for a reason. The health department makes recommendations or enforces decisions. I think what this was saying is, should an elected school board determine whether masks are good, bad, or whether social distancing is.
But what if you wanted to follow local health experts?
Where we are, we're following.
Local follows.
The local is the county.
Oh,
In this case, the local is the county.
so,
They're asking,
okay,
No, it says and or regional. So if the county does something different than the state, we would follow the county, that would be more specific to where we live.
We did that.
we did that.
Okay.
Anyone
I
support?
still struggle with this.
Well, then you all have the,
Then oppose them.
who
Well,
supports,
Wait,
you support proposing,
who supports it?
you would want to
I
support.
would support that, yes.
I think that I would.
So the reality is you can always choose to follow them. You just don't have to, right? I like the.
We would have,
opportunity.
but this body would have to make policies as to what we would not. What we don't want, we would pick and choose, the health department say you gotta do these 10 things. This would allow the school board to pick and choose what of the 10 we want to do and why we want to do them or why we don't.
And you want
what
that
we would do.
liability, if you make a wrong call, when you're making your local decision and you make the wrong call.
I don't think we have liabilities.
Absolutely.
No.
School district does.
The district.
District,
And I think we're all
Okay.
on it, aren't we?
Okay,
yeah,
all
I'm
right.
saying personally, but I'm
No,
saying in general.
The issue is, should the school board be making health decisions? That's really the issue, and then it was born out of the federal lawsuits over who can mandate.
So from a. Okay, got it.
Yes.
I understand on the board voting, I'm still putting my personal vote in. I also understand and agree with your position, so you're letting me off the easy.
So we have 4 opposed. I was going to propose that where it's.
37.
Sorry, no, I'm wrong. Sorry.
Wait, no, we're
No,
at
it was
37,
37.
36.
36.
I don't, it's so poorly worded, I'm just gonna oppose it.
Yeah, that's.
Does anyone support this?
No.
Well,
You know what, I get what they're trying to write here, and I'm not completely opposed to it, but it is not worded.
It's not worded well.
Yeah. Yeah.
so I will support.
You were what? Supporting it?
Support with an amendment.
Support within a
Well, I
minute.
don't think
Can't,
they're not gonna amend it. Jenna can vote on Monday.
yeah, this is the vote.
Yeah.
This is the language.
So,
We don't get to offer our edits.
so who supports it? As it is? Who opposes it?
Well, I understand.
That's why I'm opposing it, because I don't understand it.
Well, I'm
Yeah, I don't know what they're trying to say.
Do you want to know, so who's an NA on it?
That abstaining.
When the,
No, no decision, NA, sorry. Who's in,
I think,
Basically, there's
We
a time that I'm just opposed to it,
Yeah.
like, if they said it.
Yeah.
In a way that was clear,
Mhm.
and then we said no decision, okay, but it's so unclear,
right,
how can you support something?
So we're-
I'm just opposed.
38?
I'm opposed.
Anyone in support of it? As it is?
I didn't realize that went away.
Yeah, this means that if you have a
It's a law.
religious exemption, you are gonna be obligated to be vaccinated in some capacity.
You
I mean,
can't.
it's all,
You already have.
There's no actual explanation there.
Kids have to have their polio, they have to have their MMR.
But that's, yeah, okay, well, yeah.
Wait, so this. Who goes? Community found value in seeing that for longstanding student vaccination requirements and the health and safety of student interest, the committee also recognized that current law with medical exemptions to those required. So basically, the medical exemption is already fixed.
Right, if you can't, like, let's say you're allergic to eggs and the delivery method is through an egg-based compound. You get a medical exemption for that. Was that?
Non-religious,
Correct. Now, medical exemption, you can't get a religious.
All right, what are we voting?
We support that. 39. Who supports 39?
Wait,
We oppose 38, 39.
what, either, I don't get it.
It's written in
So
here. and
I
it's not-
oppose this. What they're saying is they want you to oppose legislation that would eliminate single occupancy zoning, which means you could make any community a multi-family community, right, that apartments.
Oppose.
No, wait, no, hold
Oh,
on.
I'm reading it.
So is that a double negative? So you need to support, no, yeah, you need to oppose, you would, if you don't like that rule, you would oppose this, because it's the same two. That would eliminate, yeah.
Yeah. So we want to.
Who
We
supports
want
it?
to,
Who opposes that? Okay, well, it's not. 40. Who supports this? Who is opposing it?
I'm
40,
a no decision. Wait, hold on a minute. Oppose legislation that would require,
well, I think they're saying sexuality education for K through 12. Where I think we started in what, 6th grade?
yeah, so,
7th grade.
so if we oppose the opposition, and that means we support it, right?
Oppose legislation that would require school districts to adopt a comprehensive.
Yeah, so I
would support that.
you think that they shouldn't do that in kindergarten, then probably, right? So if you oppose it, you'd be opposing the opposition.
Really? Eventually they say opposing.
I feel like it's written terribly.
Oh, no, you're right, because they say NISBA support proposal, so.
NISBA should oppose any legislation that would require sexual education for K through 12 students.
So,
Do we want them to
So we support
oppose
the
any
opposition.
education that would? Yeah, so we support it.
I
We don't
support it.
oppose it.
I support it.
We support the opposition.
Yes, we
Yeah.
support the
So in
opposition.
this one would, if we're, I'm not putting any words. in
No, no, no.
anyone else's mouth,
No.
but it- but
So-
it's-
Who supports it as it's written? I support it. You support it. Okay. 41. Opposed.
I-
I'm gonna to go to read 41, where why Liv decided not to mandate this. Or decided not to support it.
Yeah, I see, because it's a statewide mandate versus an individual.
There's
Your
different kind of-
your local ability with,
Yeah.
yeah, oppose.
Yeah.
I still want a later
Me
start
too.
time for high
Me too.
schools, for high school students, but I don't want them telling me. They're gonna-
So all opposed?
Yeah.
Okay, 42. Does this mean that the
Give
school
them a-
districts want to make this happen? So the school districts want to give,
School districts want to give local exams for students who are exhibiting stress or having a hard time taking the Regents exam. So a locally developed Regents equivalence. So my guess is this is opposed because now you're going back to 700 school districts having 700 different Regents equivalency tests and you've lost your standard.
Yeah.
Oh,
Opposed?
I don't know. I think it's on. Because we're teaching the individual learner, don't use it, take that into account, right?
right.
before we finish voting on this, because I think this is I thought the same thing. I think it's the issue is, I think we already, everyone has to have a region diploma, but we have things within HUD that support students, and make sure that we're all,
We're basically saying, rather than take a regents exam, each school district can create their own exam, where students can take a school district exam and not a regents exam, but get credit for the regents exam.
So then therefore you can lower your standards.
Yeah.
For your graduation. Okay, no. I closed that.
Get accommodations
That's what
for 504 tonight, so there's no reason why we have to create a separate.
Yep, I'm with it. Thank you. That makes sense.
so we're all opposed.
Yep.
For this. And 43.
I don't understand that.
What does this mean?
It's it's like, I don't get what I'm on, educators, can we write sentences?
Been a lot of these.
Yeah,
I,
I give up on that one.
Maybe they should have not had 43.
I.
Okay.
Wait.
Wait,
Yeah.
although
Jeremy had something
Yeah.
where you.
Yeah, but we're not closing the thing, we have to just do our goals, but do you wanna do the goals?
whatever, well, so this coincides.
Okay,
And,
is it pertaining to one of these? Do
yep, well, sort of,
you wanna talk about it when we get to that goal?
Yeah,
sure.
Okay, so. Our board goal,
the board goals were fine, we had no edits.
okay, so those were just,
We can approve, we had no edits.
okay. So our board of, our district goals, we had to wordsmith a little bit, we didn't change the mean, the goal entirely, just sort of dates or how we wanted to present it. So the first goal, do you want me to read them? Okay. The district will identify.
Motion, wait, meeting.
Well, we only need three lines of words. According to the law. I think it's the date thing that we want to make sure everyone's comfortable with, so I'll go fast. The district will identify and announce specific metrics of success for the implementation of the Princeton plan before the last Board of Education meeting in 2022. Benchmark data will be collected and presented by June 2023.
So this one was a little bit of wordsmithing, but mostly we wanted to make sure that we get this calendar as soon as possible, no later than the end of the year. And so depending on when Joe and his team and staff members can get all the audits together, represented in one cohesive unit, it could be earlier than the last, right, Joe, potentially, depending on
Our last meeting is middle of December, right?
December 16th or December, something along before then. So that was only that we really changed.
So I asked at the last meeting when this topic came up, that the goal for the Princeton plan was savings only. And I asked, and I understand that there's time to put these things together, but we had a presentation today and the gentleman, this is Harmon, right, indicated that part of this building assessment plan, he's going to take into consideration the Princeton plan and how that building changes may be required. I'm not comfortable asking someone to put time and effort into that if it turns out that this Princeton plan didn't save us any money. And as a result, I don't know why we would meet any longer than the next meeting to do an analysis of the cost of UPK and the Princeton plan from a projected versus an actual savings. I don't understand how we can continue to push forward if we don't look at that now.
I don't think he could do how he's going to change those buildings too, and put up a bond for that. If we can get what you were asking
Yeah,
for,
agree.
before we get any more information on that.
Correct. I think it's all intertwined. Is that unrealistic to be able to look at the financial pyramid?
Is there a cost? Like, how much is it costing him to consider the Princeton plan stuff in there? In other words, he might be able to just give us options and say, if you continue with the Princeton plan, here's what you should do and what it would cost. And then we just take that into account when we start to think about future.
Perfect. But it's still to point one, why do we have to wait to talk about the cost of something that's already happened? We've now found out that
It's not
buses,
just the cost, we're looking at all the, about social emotional learning, whether academic scores, so it's not,
But-
our metrics of success aren't just that one data.
well, the cause of implementation was solely finance.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Joe.
It was what we originally started, so with the trigger, but then when I voted on it wasn't just about finance, because the other board members who supported it came and convinced me. And,
But that's
Took the
counter to
time.
Joe, right? Because Joe told us that the Princeton plan, at like Frank G, when we went into the meeting. And the follow-ups were that the districts are very evenly. We talked about the free and reduced lunch and that the percentage of furnace wood was even 30%. And that there was a very even distribution of socioeconomic throughout the district. So the entire presentation, and I was on the Princeton Plan Committee, right? So what you decided was not necessarily based upon the presentation of the Princeton Plan justification. I'm not rehashing that. All I'm saying is the reason that we were told we were doing this was solely for money, 1.9 or 2.1 to 1.2 to whatever we ended up. And I'm not comfortable sitting here and talking about all of these potential goals when the reason we did it was for money. That was the reason it was presented. That's the reason that it was sold. That's the reason that the community bought in. It was all about savings. And I would like to understand, like yesterday, where we are in terms of the savings we have. Therese mentioning that there's fewer. I'm sorry, Therese, I apologize.
transportation would be metric in there, right?
Yeah, but we also have fewer buses to BMMS now, potentially. Where does that go? We now have added 2 buses into this, which means really we need to take the cost from in Anthony's budget and apply that to the transportation budget, which we were told was going to be flat because we now have people working in a building 2 fewer hours a day. I mean, 8-hour day, it's 25% less work.
I think that to me, I feel like there's 2 separate things. This goal here is great, and there are definitely, there's no denying that there are metrics of success that need to be measured for Princeton, but what you're asking for, and you're asking for, and you're asking for, and I'm asking for is completely separate. We just want to know where we are to be with what we had anticipated in terms of savings, right? So that we can make decisions and thought process moving forward. So I think that it's connected, but I do think that there is some separation in terms of there should be a list of success, metrics to success for the implementation, because there's so many things that go into it, right? But this financial question is more evaluating how we're looking, how things are going, what we promised the community, are we there? And if not, how do we make decisions going forward? So I do think that it's the same, but also not.
I also think.
I think we need both. That's what I'm saying. I think we need both.
But at the end of the day, December 15th seems like this seems far, I know it's not really far away, but it is far away. I would like to advocate for pushing that forward. All of it as much as possible.
But you won't have student metrics, like how did they perform during the year?
You're
Till
doing
the end of the
everything
year.
now.
But
Benchmark.
No,
that's-
it's not the information, it's
Right.
the metrics on what we're gonna be using.
Yeah, they're doing
Right.
your benchmark testing right now in the schools. It's for the beginning.
But
of
you
the
have
school
to
year.
bench, so that data.
We just need the data. We just need to know what those metrics are going to be. That's the part we don't have right
Oh, so you're
We don't
saying,
even know
what are the
Yeah.
now. That's what this goal is, right? This goal really is what are the specific metrics?
But
That's why
separate from this, with
This
Derek,
is data, not benchmark.
I'm just worried about the second half of it. We're looking at the first.
And I think we talked about this when we talked about this goal, that we were going to have metrics before the end of the year. Before the
And
end
they're
of
saying
this
that
year.
that's not soon.
it's not soon enough.
right?
It's just not soon enough.
I'm sorry, I don't even know what the metrics are.
That's what I'm
I
saying.
just think that it's a little odd to not have the metrics at this point.
And
When
that's
you
what
make
I'm
that big of a
to be
change,
honest, that's why I'm
usually that comes before.
I thought I was clear. I honestly, I thought I was pretty clear at the last meeting about this, that we cannot wait till December 15th to establish metrics as a school. community.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. We have metrics in place. I know that, that's the whole
Okay,
point. So
so-
why are we waiting until the end of December?
I don't know what you think we're waiting. I'm confused.
This is our goal, this is where
Well,
I'm trying
then,
to.
can we say for the next board meeting?
But your metrics, but we need to have a comprehensive presentation of all of it.
What are we gonna measure to determine whether the kids have been successful? That might work, because there's no academic change for the principal.
Look at academics, look at referral.
Yep, so we're just looking for that list. Yeah.
It's all like, oh, we're doing that right now, but if I even put those numbers on the table, they would.
We're not-
be different numbers.
Saying one you want. Everything eventually data at the end of the year. What are we gonna? Two separate things.
Let me go back. One of the reasons that we talked about this goal with this proposed timeline over the summer was to identify metrics we use, assessments we have, data that we regularly collect. And what else should we be looking for, implementing, or considering around social emotional, around who knows what? Lisa and her team, she's met with her mental health team, counselors, social workers, and started that conversation to say, what data that we typically either haven't collected or never, or assessments or things that we haven't done that we could, that would be not real intrusive, that wouldn't feel like one more initiative, that wouldn't feel like one more thing we're asking you to do, but it was in the natural course of pushing into classrooms, doing, I'm going to call it character ed, it's not character ed anymore. How many kids are you seeing? For what reasons are you seeing them? Anxiety, friendship, so on and so forth. And to build that piece of the puzzle. Margaret's right. We have a bunch of things that we do to kids to collect info. And there's a bunch of things that we want to know that we have to build. And that was the conversation we had in July and August to say, we've got to go talk to our people who boots on the ground, who do this every day, to say, what is the Westchester County Elementary Counselor Association? What do they do? How do they identify growth over time? We've had an elementary counseling program for 3 years. That's it. So it's in its infancy, and we just doubled it a couple of years ago that we have second counseling. The goal, the idea with this goal of no later than the end of 22, which is, in 6 weeks, was to give our people time to recommend what we should be doing in addition to what we always do. That's it. It was to make sure that our people that are most responsible for this data have input, can go, talk to their colleagues, their specialists or whatever, and report back.
So should we ask the principals in the elementary schools to come share with us what they think we should be looking at to help measure the success? We're not educators.
I don't think it will be different. They're going to come in November, but they're going to give a status of the, first couple months of school.
Well, what I'm saying is the metrics that they would want to measure to determine. So the
We should
question.
be giving that to Joe. Joe's compiling this giant list.
Those are conversations we're having with our administrative team. What we don't want to do is we don't want to have.
So you're bringing those to us. We're not telling you what we want to measure.
Well, if you want to say, gee, we're missing this piece,
We
or
can hear their ideas. We can say, oh, I thought of this, it's not there.
That's the reason,
Right.
cannot be the
I think
last
that's
meeting in
fair.
November.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
Let's-
but
Cannot-
the goal, remember, the idea here is to, what do we currently collect? What do we wish to collect, and make sure that the kids don't become guinea pigs. And otherwise, we're going to be assessing to try to hurry up and meet a goal. That's going to have an unintended consequence. Our spirit of our conversation during the retreat was, we want to know, are they coming to school? Are they learning? Are they behaving? Do they feel good about themselves? They feel good about their situation. That gets into social emotional stuff that we typically don't measure, and schools usually don't.
Can you expedite that any more than?
We can talk to our teams who will be responsible for recommending that to see if they go quicker.
We're not, we don't want the numbers quicker.
No, the
top.
the measure topic.
I'm sitting here again as someone that didn't vote on it. I was not on board last year. I honestly, still sit here going, I don't understand. What this is. That's beside the point. I said this the last time. I really feel very strongly that we already have this groundwork done. I don't want to wait until December 1st for this to come together.
We could come back in 2 weeks and say, here are the assessments we use in elementary that we would consider, that we would suggest are considerable data points and give us good information over time. And then we'll need to come back probably at a meeting in November and say, well, and the mental health team suggests these measurements for these things, so on and so forth. We could give you that. We could rattle off 10 of them right now.
Like you can say,
But everything that's not being rattled off,
because testing definitely measures something, but it doesn't give you the whole picture, is the parents' input and the students' actual input. Because we have an opportunity right now.
I think that comes through working with teams. We've already had this discussion and we have, I actually have another meeting tomorrow, my mental health team talking SEL, student input, there's going to be some sort of survey, very brief for the for 1-2s. And then it gets a little bit more in depth as they get older. So we have all this information ready to go.
Are you gonna do it for the parents as well?
That's tomorrow's meeting, so I'll be able to tell you as soon as I meet with my team. Because they're the experts in this, right?
Yeah.
I just help guide them. So I think the thing that we have to think about is what is their real input and where are they getting their information? The elementary school counselors, the elementary social workers, psychologists, we all listservs that we go through, which you know about, but they talk to all their colleagues. This is actually happening in one of the school counselors' home district. So this will allow us to say, oh, look at, they've asked this, this is way too much for our kids, or way too much to ask the kid, but maybe this goes to the adult kind of survey, right? And then those surveys can be posted, published, it doesn't matter.
You're still working. And that's the point of why we tried, not trying, but I think that's a question about the December is because they're still actively working on this. So if Joe gives us an update in 2 weeks, and another 2 weeks, we get another update. I personally would rather just all the information at once to see the whole picture. I think the community would want to see what's going on.
Because it sounds like half the board doesn't want to be waiting till the very end of the year, right? And then others are concerned that we need more time to come up with the metrics. So maybe there's a happy medium. Is there a meeting in November that we could put this on the agenda
What
for?
we could do is come back in November and say, here are the metrics that we typically use and why we would want to measure this over time. So a what and a rationale. And as we receive more information, we can always do that. This goal does not say that it must happen the last meeting of December. It says that it needs to happen by then.
Yeah, that's my, well, it's gotta be, cannot be that last week. That's
Well,
what I.
So historically, we wait till.
Yep.
Right, like in humans, not me as just specifically this body or.
Well, yeah, we also get super busy, like the next meeting is already loaded, right?
Yeah.
So my mind is saying that there is a time, hopefully in November, that this conversation can happen.
And we should get the pulse of the PTA on this too, because that's a big part of the academic experience.
Yeah, we had probably one.
Yeah. And then, that's fine, and then the financial piece can come separate as another.
The financial part can come later. I already have it.
Okay.
You can ask me for today. Which is posted, it's Cheryl.
Okay. Okay.
So
So next meeting. UPK two. UPK two and all of it.
Well,
Get down
that
to the
was a whole
pulse.
nother.
Oh,
conversation.
now, right?
Okay, so, yeah.
Losing sleep over it. So, yeah, so is everyone good with goal 1?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
the district will present the outcomes of the strategic plan at a Board of Education meeting before October 31st. And will develop prioritized projects and action teams, which will be presented to the community by June 30th, 2023. This is scheduled for our next meeting, so, yeah.
And then the second half is another by date. So I know some of you guys are getting hung up on this, like deliver by June 30th, but that doesn't mean we're gonna wait until the last board meeting of the school year.
We did that last year. That's what I'm saying. We have to really be cautious about these dates. Because we do see them as a historically.
But the strategic plan process is involving hundreds of people. We've invested a lot of time, effort, and money already. So you can't rush the process. We're trying, one of our core goals is to increase community engagement. And if you're rushing through the process, you're rushing through the community engagement that we need to get to all of these things.
Can I also just add one thing, that the budget vote is going to take place in May. You won't know how much money you have.
You'll know some of it because
You'll know some.
but we're not gonna prioritize all projects. But we have renovations in January, in December and January to go over all 4 pillars.
Yep.
So we will definitely have an idea of what projects have been prioritized that we can plan for next year.
And then once we have the budget passed, and we'll hopefully pass a budget that would cover all those projects, then we can develop the prioritized action teams right? Once
That's
we know we have the
happening.
money.
You're
Definitely
about
soon.
to process in 2 weeks, how we will operationalize, how we're going to encourage people to participate, what the oversight will be. I mean, I know you weren't there, but we spent an entire day with the strategic plan folks in the summer saying, when do we want our information? When do we want to hear? How do we want to sort of watch this process unfold? To what degree do we participate? But yeah, it's moving a big ship when you have hundreds of people participating and they all want their voices.
I just don't want this to end up being shelfware, right? You know, I want to make sure that whatever we do is actionable. It's not just a nice document that we put together, but we're actually going to act on it. And to do that, we need the money. And we won't know if we have the money until May. So that, you know, and you don't want to rush something like this because this is a change management project. This is not like a capital project plan where you get things done. This is a change in culture for the entire community.
So you're saying we won't even have the,
So-
we won't even have the budget, our ideas in the budget pass until May, so,
So you'd rather do it right than do it fast,
yes.
right?
then
So I
they-
kind of feel that, but at the same time, you want to make it actionable and you want to give yourself some aggressive goals. So to me, it sounds reasonable. But again, you won't be able to do a lot of this until the budget passes.
Well, this is all written in there. It's just that, I know last
It's a
year.
very little
oh,
bit
here's
of
the thing.
time.
We
Budget
gave our,
passes.
we gave our final strategic plan. It was the last meeting of the year last year. Everyone's like tuned out. But we have to just be cautious of that as a board when we're setting our agenda and our goals, like when we're doing these things. Because everybody at that point.
Well, we're gonna be working, so as plans get prioritized through this school year, they're gonna be worked into next year's budget. The budget vote happens in May. What Corey's saying is this final, there's gonna be a final presentation of what was approved in the budget.
I know, and last year was the last, basically the last board meeting. We just need to be cognizant of that stuff. I worked on this very, very intensely and with a lot of hours and hours and hours and hours. So I understand. But we have to make sure that we're not just doing things. You need time, but this has to be a priority as well. So June 30th, June is.
But if the budget's on in May, right,
Yeah,
it's gonna end up being.
We're gonna have we should have our priorities pretty well.
We're going to have, we committed over the summer to having quarterly updates. Remember, we did it at the end of the day, we took the big calendar out, we said, what do we
Well,
want to
Vicky-
do and when? This is going to be a very regular conversation with regular updates. I don't think that we're going to have radio silence from October 28th until whatever meeting.
Okay.
Well, there's two parts here. On the one part, I agree, don't want to go fast, and from, okay, on the other hand, we're talking about May 16th for free. The budget is done by March 15th, because we don't want to have $1 million, so suddenly we say, okay, I want this new proposal, that's going to cost $1 million, add it to the budget. But you don't want to start with a budget, just say a number of 9 million, and then suddenly in March, it comes out, no, we want another $1 million.
But that's gonna be happening, it's gonna be happening as we move through the strategic plan process. That we're gonna say, oh, this project needs to be prioritized, and we're gonna be adding it in January.
Yeah, but I agree in January, but again, the deadline for the board to approve the budget, I think, and I'm not sure, but it has to be around the beginning of April, end of March.
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying. On the one hand, we cannot go very fast. On the other hand, we cannot go very slow, because then suddenly, it's March, and there's a new idea that it's going to cost $1 million. What do we do?
And you have to plan in the budget for, assuming we're going to do everything we prioritize, here's what it's going to cost. But our community has a history of not voting in every budget. And if that budget gets voted down for whatever reason,
But we voted down, there was 2013?
No,
Was it
27.
20, what is it? 2007. 2007.
I think we're getting a little
We're like,
ahead of ourselves with committing this until we will feel better about our timeline. We will see it in front of you when they present here in 2 weeks. And that we're going to have decisions. We're going to have to make adjustments to a budget or say, this is really great committee. The board will vote up or down, and then we'll determine when we phase things in. There will also be some costs. We can't assume that every initiative in the strategic plan is a new cost. And we had talked about this at our retreat. There's going to have to be a conversation around planned abandonment too. That there are some things we've done that we may need to replace or supplement or supplant, but I think we've got to get there first. And our job is going to be to determine what we're going to do and then when we're going to do it. And not everything will be able to be done by April 1st. But to fast forward a process to hurry it up and hurry up is sending a message that it would be and that it would be approved. And I think we've got to approach this, any initiative to the extent possible, cost neutral to avoid any potentiality of a budget being voted down. And that if we approach this from a cost neutral standpoint, anything above and beyond then is really a deliberation. But you will see a very specific timeline and target dates over the next number of months when they come and present in 2 weeks. But those timelines and target dates are based on what we thought was a priority, which was outsourcing a lot of this discussion to our community. And we are going to be as good and as fast as our community can participate. And that is always a hang.
and this is kind of the point too. So we're meeting with them here on the 27th. So we got an email today from Ed Element.
Oh, not everyone, just people who are on it too.
Exactly. That we're talking to them the day and the day before that, like, so. It's right, it's like the day right before it.
Yeah, they come Thursday.
Yeah, but no, but they're meeting with
Yeah.
the pillar group
Tuesday.
the action team right before.
To give them a courtesy heads up saying, here's the final product, you worked on this, we want to celebrate your participation, and here's what it looks like, and you get a sneak peek before it gets completely unveiled to the community. So we wanted to have very little daylight between us.
The next year.
Okay, so can we approve this one?
Yeah.
During the 2022-23 school year, the district will engage architects to conduct a building condition survey that will evaluate all school buildings and facilities. The district will present the results of the building condition survey to the community and prioritize getting a turf field. I'm just kidding. Prioritize potential improvement projects by June 30th, 2023.
Another turf field, and what do you know?
They're all gonna be done.
Yeah, that's great. We're on track. Goal 4. The district will update and communicate the long-term financial plan that will include responsible tax management, increases in state aid, facilities projects, and continued participation in advocacy initiatives to improve our financial stability. That one we like slightly changed last time, and I like,
Yeah, I had like the tax management,
right, and it's not 10-year,
Yeah,
it's just long-term, yeah.
Yep.
Everyone's good?
Yeah. and then
Uh,
no changes to number 5.
Okay, perfect. The school district will increase opportunities and methods to celebrate student and staff accomplishments to enhance a positive community culture. No, he went.
So,
All right.
and the district, there are no pages for the district. We can do it officially vote on them
Board.
or 4 votes. We need
You
to,
don't need to vote on your board members. So you do need a vote on this.
Okay,
You need a
so
motion.
I have a motion to approve the district goals for the school year. Second, all in favor? All right, I need a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?